Morning, everybody. Our speaker today is Greenwich First Selectman Fred Camillo, and he's going to be speaking about challenges that he's facing and that the town is facing. Fred is a lifelong Greenwich resident who graduated from Greenwich High School in 1980. He is currently serving his third term as First Selectman after serving 11 years as our state representative for the 151st District and as Assistant Minority Leader in the House. His professional experience includes being a small business owner, having been one of the founders of Greenwich Recycling Co, and working as a high school teacher, baseball coach, and real estate professional. So please join me in welcoming Fred Camillo.
Thank you, Peter. This thing feels like a baseball helmet. But I'm not used to wearing this. But good morning, everybody. Great to see everybody. It's been a while since I've been here. I know these formats are usually better when there's a lot of questions, and so I'll kind of, err in that side where, we're going to have more questions than me sitting up here and just talking, standing up here and just talking. But Greenwich, Peter asked me to talk a little bit about what Greenwich is facing, and sometimes we get mesmerized by rankings, right? Thankfully, we are rated, at the top of the rankings that really count, right? Public safety. Last year, two publications around the country one had us at 87th safest in the nation, municipality, and one had us at number 10. And one had us at number 1 in Connecticut. And we're a town of 63,300 people, so we're up against some towns with 3,000 or 4,000 people, so they should be a lot safer. So that just shows you how well our town is run with our police department and our fire department and GEMS and our emergency operations director, Joe Lasello. They're doing a great job. So Greenwich has a AAA credit rating. We have, for all intents and purposes, the lowest mill rate in the state of Connecticut. There is one town that's a little bit lower, but they have about 5,000 people in it. So we're really up there where you want to be. That being said, we face lots of challenges, and if you don't evolve and you don't keep working at it, you will start to slip. And being in the Northeast, right, we're not a tax haven state, so we lose a lot of people every year to those states that have lower taxes and have maybe more sunshine than we do. So we have to do things better, and Greenwich always does do that, but we have to keep evolving. So we're looking at things like we have zoning mandates coming down from Hartford. So I'm sure you've heard 830G, probably sick of hearing about it, but just a quick reminder, we are doing very well. Just 4 years ago, we were at 5.2% of the 10% that we need to get to. We're about 5.8 now, and Greenwich communities, and I know you heard from Sam and Tony a few weeks ago, when they're done with the projects over at McKinney Terrace and at Quarry Knoll and finishing Armstrong Court, Sam was telling me they should be around close to 7%. He thinks he may be a little bit over at some point. That's huge, and that actually gets us to a 4-year moratorium, but we got to get to the 10%. And so we're going to keep working at it, and we're trying to do that so we get the state off our back, and we don't have developers circumventing local control of zoning. So even as I mention all the time, the governor always says Greenwich is doing a very good job. We're doing it our way. No one knows their towns and cities better than those who live there, not Hartford representatives and senators. So we'll keep working at that. Another challenge we face is our dated infrastructure. Every single town, all the municipalities, all 169 face the same issue. Infrastructures are over 100 years old, so when they were built, they weren't built to withstand the kind of development we've seen in the last 40 or 50 years here. So when we get rain, right, a lot of us don't sleep at night because we know people are going to flood. I talk from experience. I've flooded 5 times in my life, both in Cos Cob and in Byram. So it's an unsettling feeling every time it rains. When you get 8 or 9 inches in 9 hours like we had in Ida, nothing you can do about it because it just overwhelms the drains. But last year we had 8 or 9 inches in 36 hours in September, and it was okay because it gave the drains some time to take in the water, give them a little bit of a break. So if it's spaced out a little bit, we can handle it. But if it comes all at once, you can get 3 inches in an hour, you're going to have flooding. So that's always an issue, but I know one of the questions, I don't want to steal your thunder, but the town is working really hard on that. And certain areas we can do some things. We've put millions of dollars into Pemberwick, some through ARPA funding, and that's been an issue there since at least 1955 when literally houses were floating down the Byron River. So we're making great progress there, but it's not done, but we're making some great progress there, and I'll certainly go into more detail when I get the question. But, certainly, there are some areas where houses were built 50, 60 years ago in the valley, not much you can do. I've suggested if we bought them out and made a retention pond there, DPW agreed with me, that would solve it, but that sets a precedent, right? And so the town, and I see Harry Fisher's here. I don't think the BET is going to allow me to go around and give out money for that because that sets a precedent. And where would that end? And you got a hard enough job as it is, right? You don't need me adding to it. So, those are lots of things. Crime, right? I just mentioned how safe we are, but we're still a target. I think Rye, New York set the record last year with most vehicles stolen. When we leave doors open and key fobs in there, they're going to get stolen. But, they know that. And a lot of these crime rings are coming from Waterbury, from Hartford, from South America, believe it or not. Our department, police department, is in touch with the FBI routinely, regularly, and we get all of these guys, but it takes a while sometimes. And so, all we can do is to keep telling people, if you can put a camera on your house, do that. Lock the doors. Take the keys in. If you like dogs, please get a dog. The number one deterrent is the sound of a dog barking, followed by light. Then comes the alarm, believe it or not. So there's certain things we can do, but we have to, again, keep on top of it because it's only getting tougher out there and more difficult and more complicated. But we have a good team in town. We're blessed with that. So we'll keep going on there. I can go on to a few more, but I know you want to get to some questions, so I'll stand down and listen.
Thank you, Fred. So yes, so these are questions. These are questions. I think I just spoke into your mic. These are questions that the members submitted to me in the last week. Fred touched on a few of these topics, but perhaps he will want to expand on it. So the first one has to do with clear cutting of trees. The RTM is considering an ordinance to control clear cutting of trees on private property. The town attorney says an ordinance must first go to the Board of Selectmen. Do you support an ordinance like the one the RTM is considering?
Thank you, Peter. So just an update on that. So the people who are bringing that ordinance forward, it's been ruled out of legal order, so they're going to come back with something else because there's some things in there that the law department had an issue with. But I spoke with one of the people behind the ordinance, and their concern is that a lot of clear cutting is going on private property. So now they realize that they have to balance this because private property rights are a big thing. Right? None of us want to give up private property rights. But we also know that a town has to have some type of structure in place where people, you just can't do anything to your house, right? That's going to affect maybe your neighbors. So they're going to circle back with us and come back with something that balances private property rights with aesthetics. And trees are a good thing. They're healthy for us. They look beautiful. We've seen, unfortunately, a couple instances where people a developer has gone in and clear cut some things, and in one recent case, the project didn't even get approved. So those trees were cut really for no good reason, but I guess something else is going to go in there, but not what was planned. So we'll stay tuned on that one. You got to be very careful. We have a lot of commissions and committees and task forces, so you don't want to overdo it too much where people just get numb to it. You want to make sure that these things are actually doing good work. And so, before we take that step, I want to see what they come back with, but certainly we're all in favor of a town that's nice and green.
And so the next question is about flooding, and you already mentioned it, but clear cutting and flooding sort of go hand in hand. The Public Works Department developed several elaborate solutions to control riverine flooding in central Cos Cob. I see we have a parent here of Suburban Avenue resident. But then Public Works told the homeowners they're on their own to raise their houses or build flood control structures on their property. They say much of the flooding can be blamed on the dozens of subdivisions the town approved upstream over decades. Can't the town help these homeowners in some way?
That's a multi-million-dollar question. I think, especially with Cos Cob, I grew up there, and so I grew up on Orchard Street behind Cos Cob School. So that's one of the areas that gets pounded. And in 2007, when we had 2 massive storms in one month, and there was 4 to 5 feet in the basement of the house I grew up in, twice. And at the same time, I was flooding in Byram. So, but that was coming up through the concrete, and it wasn't 4 to 5 feet; it was about 2 feet. But we were next to the brook back at Cos Cob School. We were told in 2007 that a lot of the building that had gone on upstream, Upper Bible Street, was contributing to that, and I believe that is true. I've spoken with a lot of engineers, but. When you get those types of flooding events, those weather events where there's flash floods, and combined with high tides, sometimes it's a perfect storm. Well, we saw that Superstorm Sandy in 2012. So I was at that meeting, and no one wants to be heard. Wants to hear, you got to raise your house, and that will help. It will help, but not everybody has that kind of money to raise the houses. I know. Some friends over in Old Greenwich did that after the nor'easter we had in '92 near the beach, and they lifted their houses up. But again, that's a really expensive proposition for somebody to do. So, we continue to look at things, and we go back and forth. It's not just DPW. We get other people, environmental affairs, involved to see what else we can do. We tell people, we have tens of thousands of drains in the town. And it's a lot. So I've asked them, it's impossible for them to check it all the time. They do check the problem areas before a storm, but not all of them. So we constantly remind people, when you're doing your walks, check, and you go by a drain, check it, and let us know if you see stuff in there. Because that's how it serves as a reminder to us to get out there and check them. So that's, there's certain things we can continue to do, and look at, any idea is up for discussion. Even if you've been told no by a department in town, things change sometimes, and sometimes new technologies come on the market, and they're constantly looking at that. So if you've been told that, believe me, it's not, we're saying, well, you're on your own. There's 5 houses, just 5 houses that flood usually over on a Valleywood Road, and we're looking at something that may be able to help them. And when I first heard about this years ago, they were 46th in line. And the reason why they weren't number 1 is because DPW would rank the areas to see how many were affected. So if you're in an area where 120 houses are getting flooded, and the 3 Apple Tree Lane over in Riverside are also getting flooded, you're going to be rated higher because you have more houses being affected. They're trying to do the most they can, be as efficient as they can. But it doesn't mean that those 3 houses are forgotten about Apple Tree. We're constantly working with them and trying to help in any way we can, but they have to do a priority ranking.
Thank you. So this next question is a sort of a combination affordable housing, traffic congestion question. Greenwich has a shortage of housing for its workforce. Much of the low-paid workforce of Greenwich restaurants, retail stores, and others, those people commute to work by car, contributing to our hated rush hour traffic congestion. How can Greenwich meet this need? Do you support Greenwich Community's plan to build 48 units of affordable housing over the commuter parking lot at the Cos Cob Railroad Station?
So that's a great question. So that's a terrific idea that Sam Romeo and Tony Johnson have come up with. It's a surface parking lot. It's right across from the train station. I've been encouraging them to continue to keep looking at things where we can push that ball down the field towards that 10% so we can get them off our backs, them meaning Hartford. That there, I did say, though, I advised them to have a public hearing because you never want to, people live there. And if I'm reading something and I say, well, there's another development going up across the street, even if it's a surface parking lot that doesn't really look that great, but where you've previously saw nothing, you may see something. So you're going to get riled up, right? So I said, you have to explain it. Anytime you do something, you have to explain it and try. I've learned this a long time ago from a lot of mentors. You got to try and bring people along with you and listen to them and try and get some ideas, because if you come at them, right, they're going to get their back up and they're going to fight you on it. And we're trying to explain to people that if we don't get to that 10%, you could say, I don't want it here because I live here, then we're all under assault. None of us are safe in our, because that 830G allows them to circumvent local zoning. The only reason why a few of them got stopped is, for example, the one over in Brookridge, they were outside the sewer district, and that would have to go before the RTM for approval, and that wasn't going to happen. So if it's got to be a really compelling reason to stop one of those things, and it's hard to. So, you don't want to be in a one-family zone and all of a sudden have a three-family house next to you. No one wants that. Hartford doesn't care, but no one wants that. So, in the suburbs, I should say. So, that law is 33 years old. There's 169 municipalities in Connecticut. Only 28 have met the 10%. It's a failure. It has failed miserably. Yet, not only are they taking a step back to look at it, they're actually doubling down, and there's some bills up there that would, the fair share bill, if you look at that, could almost require up to 19%. Never going to get it. We'll all be dead. So, but we want to do it right. And if you go by Armstrong Court, I mean, I grew up there as a kid. My grandmother lived there. That's what they look like. That we didn't know any difference. But you look at Armstrong Court today, the way it looked, right? It's not attractive. Right? It doesn't look nice. Look at it now. People love it there, and it gives them pride in where they live. So that's the way to do it. Do it right. Get to the 10%, but make it look really nice and give those people. So, and there's even some programs Greenwich Communities has where they could set aside some money, and they have, where they at a certain time they hand it back to them, and they use that for a down payment for a home. So there's lots of good things on the horizon. We're trying to promote that. So to answer to your short question, I support the concept of what they're trying to do there, but I want to make sure the neighborhood's okay with it too. But they do have a lot of other things coming up down the pike that actually is going to get us, up there towards that 10%.
So here's a similar question, but it relates to seniors, like most of the folks here today. The issue is that a lot of seniors are sort of stuck in their single-family houses. We're living much longer. Their existing houses are quite affordable because of low taxes, and we can defer maintenance forever. There aren't too many alternatives for a lot of seniors to stay in Greenwich, so they choose to stay in their single-family houses. And so there aren't single-family houses for young, growing families. You have any thoughts on that issue?
Yeah, I think I think a lot of people I don't think they look at it as being trapped in their homes. There's a lot of people that don't ever want to leave their home, right? My father was one of those guys. He loved his home that he built over in Orchard Street. So, and that's where he passed. So I think the idea is it's a mix. We really want people who, if they are elderly and they want to stay here, they should be able to stay here, right? It's up to us to try and make it as easy as possible for them. So on the flip side of that, the good thing is that's a good problem, right? We have people wanting to come here. And there's not very much inventory on the market right now. I think there's a little over 100 listings. That's extremely low. So if you do want to sell your house, right, at some point, now's a good time. You'll make out as long as you have a place to go, right? And if you're, fixing on going somewhere else that's warmer, that's great. But a lot of people like it here, right? And we don't blame them. So I'd ever want to encourage people to get out, because especially ones that have lived here a long time and volunteered and contributed to the town and made it a great town. So it's a good problem to have, that people want to come here.
So we had a talk about the transfer station here a week or two ago, and we know there's some plans to redevelop the dump, and we're curious to know if you'll be providing electric power to the book recycling station, which is now dependent on a generator.
Yeah, so I'll take the second one first. So I hadn't heard that. I just got a call yesterday about getting power out to a shed on Island Beach for the lifeguards, because they're going to be moving them, which is the first I heard. So I reached out to Joe today about that. I had not heard about the book shed, even though I visit it once in a while. So I'll follow up on that one. But as far as the dump, yeah, that's been something that's been talked about at least since the 1980s. And they have some great ideas about redoing it and the flow, how really nice it would make it. Because right now, the way it's not a functional dump. And it's called a transfer station today, but it's still a dump to me. So you see, Tony Rainey in the booth there, when you go over the scale, he's checking cars and trucks and weighing them there. But if somebody goes up around the recycling area, right, that we don't have anybody there. So you can actually go to the recycling center, throw off your recycling, and have 1,000 pounds in your trunk, and you're dumping it for free. And as somebody in my office called it, it's open bar down there. So we all end up paying for that. So if we could we're working on I spoke with somebody in Hilton Head, South Carolina, and they have a system where they have a few people at different points in their transfer stations and their dumps. And people get a card for free, and they have a code there, and you have to check, and you're allowed to go down, I think, twice a week. And they have a pay structure there. And it does capture some of that money. But right now, it doesn't work. And so it's a big cost. I'm a big proponent of redoing that dump for a lot of reasons. Right? We could start moving some things down there when you redo it. That would free up the Parks and Rec operation at Roger Sherman Park. That's a shame that we have that there and we can't move it to the dump, because we already we put an RFP out. We have designs to redo that park, and you'd get views of the water that you haven't had since the 1950s. That's some of the most expensive land on the East Coast, and we're parking trucks there. But until I get funding to the dump, it's going to stay there, because that's the place it has to go. But it's not only a good place to store these other things, it's that the flow is going to be really nice. It's going to make it really quick, and we'll be able to capture those scofflaws that are going down there. And I don't mean you, Mr. Pollack, but he's looking at me like I'm accusing him, who are going down there and not paying. And so it's a challenge, but we had Mark Boughton, a commissioner from Revenue Services, come down last year, and he thought there was funding available. And I followed up with him. I don't know if there is or not. We're still having this talk, but he was pretty confident that we could apply for some type of funding. And because some of the first responder operations are in areas that get flooded, So he thought that that was a good selling point. So we're still working on that, but it's got to be done at some point. Again, this is over 40 years we've been talking about it, and it's millions of dollars. I mean, Harry, you may be right, it's like 15 million or something. It's not cheap, but it certainly would help us and would help the aesthetics of the town. It would help our first responding units, the flow of traffic down there. It would actually recoup some money. It would just be a win-win-win, but we just have to figure out how to pay for it. But I'll keep putting it in there.
We do have the chairman of the BET here in the audience, so he's listening carefully. There
Gets more pressure than anybody.
There were other questions about capital projects, Dorothy Hamill's ice skating rink, Roger Sherwin Baldwin Park, sewer treatment plant at Grass Island. We just had a period when interest rates were almost zero. Some people think we should have taken advantage of that by funding these projects on a longer-term basis. Is that a missed opportunity?
Yeah, that's always, I remember that debate, and the flip side, it's a very solid position and point of view to have. The resistance to that, which is also, I think, has a lot of validity, is Greenwich has always been one of those towns that didn't incur a lot of debt, right? And we have a AAA rating, and we have a low mill rate. And of course, the grand list helps with that too. But it's been very well run. We don't ever want to see ourselves getting like other towns in trouble that they've gotten into with long-term debt. But certainly, we've amended it over the years. We used to have pay-as-you-go from the 1930s on by Roger Sherman, who was on the BET. That stayed that way until around 2000 when we did a modified pay-as-you-go, when we purchased two-thirds of the Pomerantz Tuckman property in Cos Cob. And I think it was a 5-year note. We paid it off like in 2 or 3 years. Now, that works. I mean, so we can fool around with that, and I'm all for figuring out ways, thinking outside the box. I just do worry, though. I don't ever want to be in that position where we're throwing debt on, like the state government does or other entities, where it does start to, at some point, you got to pay for it, and it just, that's why in town here we're really working hard on public-private partnerships. So I'll segue right over to coming on the heels of the Civic Center, which is going to be opening up in a few months with a public-private partnership. I've reached out to somebody well-known in town, and they're willing to help with the skating rink. We're just waiting on approval from zoning. And what's exciting about that, it's not just a brand-new state-of-the-art skating rink. If you've been down to Dorothy Hamill Rink in Byram, where it is now, it would be flipped to the baseball field, which was named after Sal Straza. That Straza field, three of us, me, myself, and 2 other people, had started something called the Greenwich Baseball Foundation many years ago. And we had Major League Baseball, a guy named Murray Cook came down, who was also a GM for the Yankees at one time, and he helped us figure out where to put the field, where fields are going now because of the sun and where it would be in the batter's eyes and the time of day. And we had a friend in town who was a landscape architect who had worked on some things in Randall's Island in New York, designed it for nothing for us. So we had this showcase baseball field ready to go, and it stood there, and we needed some funding. So this actually is going to give us that baseball field with dugouts, right? And it's going to be regulation 90-foot diamond that we have at the Straza field. So it's just being flipped, but you're going to get 2 first-class facilities there, where right now they're very subpar. Dorothy Hamill was built in 1972. It wasn't called Dorothy Hamill then. And I remember skating there in 1972. It was just a slab of ice and boards. Then they put a roof over it. And then one side, it was done piecemeal. And it's one of the worst rinks in Fairfield County. And if you go to other rinks, it's embarrassing. If you go to and you talk about baseball, years ago, about 15 or so years ago, we were awarded a state tournament, and Greenwich had to play their games at Cabetta Stadium in Stamford. It was embarrassing. So this would solve 2 problems. Plus, we're going to look at solar there and anything else we can do. We heard from the residents they wanted some walkability, so we have designs to put a sidewalk all around there for the people in McKinney Terrace and on Sherman Avenue, so they can walk around there. We're also going to enhance the Eugene Morlock Park. If you've never been there, there's a bunch of trees there. They're dedicated to Greenwich boys that fought and lost their lives in Korea and World War II and Vietnam. And it means a lot to those families there. And so when you go there to a hockey game or a baseball game, most people don't even know it's there. So we like to clean it up, put a nice little sign there signifying what exactly is there and why it's there. So it's a whole new, view, a vision of that, and we're just waiting for the go-ahead from P&Z, and then we'll be off to the races.
Another capital project in Glenville. Folks, there's a very elaborate plan for pedestrian safety and better traffic movement. People up there are disappointed that there are no funds in the budget for that to implement that project. Are you thinking of an interim appropriation?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. There was two things there. There was a sidewalk we promised to get done and put in the budget, which is in the budget for Hawthorne, which would connect those neighborhoods over to Weaver Street. And then the other one was dependent upon grants that we were getting from the state. And to make a long story short, about 3 or 4 years ago, we were ready to go with that, and then a few residents came out concerned about some tree cutting, even though there was more trees going there than we were taking out, and that caused us a year delay, and then we're right into the pandemic, and then all of a sudden the prices went up, and we had to rebid it, and so the latest update on that is, and we just did something with Glenville, is DPW is fairly confident that we're going to get some funding again, and it should be all paid for. So yes, and we had already said publicly we would go for an interim, but it's almost all going to come back to the town. I think it's almost $6 million.
We put it back in the budget.
Yeah, so
It's in the fiscal 25 budget.
yeah, that's right. You did it the other day. So that's all. That'll be taken care of. And
Breaking news.
But the construction won't be started until probably well into next year. But and thank you for doing that. But most of that is going to come back to us in funding. So we're confident about that. And again, the other sidewalk is already in the budget.
So you mentioned planning and zoning. There was a proposal in your budget for an additional zoning enforcement officer, also for a sustainability coordinator. The BET cut both of those proposed positions. Mr. Fisher is smiling. Is there a better way to budget that doesn't get people's hopes up and then dashes them?
Well, first, before I answer, I mean, in defense of the BET, their job really is, it's not to be a rubber stamp for the First Selectman or First Select Woman. They really have to vote on a budget that they think, delivers the services, keeps taxes low, and keeps order, public safety, public health. And we go back and forth, and we should have these disagreements, right? I mean, Harry and I are great friends, right? We don't agree on everything. But this year that we submitted a budget that overall had a net decrease of 4 positions. So these 2 new ones really it was still a -4. We thought that they paid for themselves. And certainly the sustainability one, I thought really would help pay for itself because of potential grants. We get a lot of grants, and Taylor Fairburn does a great job in our community development office. But it's impossible. I mean, his job really was for community development block grant issues. But we send him to chasing down everything else too, and it's very time consuming. And just to show you how much even though I think we do a very good job with the grants, we miss a lot. I was driving to Town Hall about a month and a half ago, and I heard on the radio about a federal grant program for people in flood-prone areas where there's nothing you can do, and there'd be some money. I said, I never knew that. And so we tracked it down, and there's something in the state, apparently, so we're looking, and if I wasn't listening to WCBS radio, I would never have known it. So I think that position would absolutely pay for itself. especially with the weather events that we're getting. That problem is not going away. So I thought it was a very well thought out and, defensible ask, but, we'll hopefully go back next year and we'll try again.
So the RMA, of course, is completely nonpartisan, but we did get questions that are of a partisan nature. One of them was asking about the, I'll call it rift within the Republican Party in town. What do you see as the future of the Greenwich Republican Party?
I think it's bright. You're always going to have these things. I remind people, 20-something years ago, I was a chairman there, and I came in. It was split down the middle, and it took several months, several heated discussions on the phones. I don't think there was email then, or there may have been, but it was not as prevalent today. It happens. It happens all over. You see it in both parties. You see it in other towns. But things will get better. I know it's a toxic environment throughout the country. But if you look at our history, in the 60s it was like that. People thought it was the end of the world. We do come back at the beginning of the founding of our country. Look, you think the campaigns are crazy today. Look at some of those by Jefferson and Adams, and they were pretty brutal to each other. And then things kind of became civil over time. And then it's, swung back a little bit again towards that. But I think one of the differences is social media. I can't tell you, I like going on there to wish people happy birthday. I like looking at some other things like on Twitter, but then I look, oh my God, people are tweeting to me and they don't have their names on it. It's, Patriot 155 and, you this, you that. And it's tough, right? So you got to have a thick skin. You really shouldn't read all that stuff. You shouldn't let all that criticism rent space in your head, and likewise you shouldn't let compliments get to you, because you're not as good as the compliments are, and you're probably not as bad as the criticisms are. But it enables people to have a platform to be able to say things that they wouldn't say in front of you, things that they wouldn't even say at a public meeting with lots of people there. But they can go home. I've literally, I know you've worked with a lot of these people too in town. You're literally with one at a meeting, and they're fine, and next thing you know, at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning, they're on social media and saying some not so nice things. And you literally were right next to them, and they didn't say 2 words. So that's a problem, and I don't know how that goes away over time. We love free speech, and you got to be very careful with that. Likewise, we have an issue now. If somebody goes on our town web pages, we had to go get legal opinions. What do you do if somebody's there saying something that's not true, and it's not true, and you can prove it's not true? They still have rights. So it's an evolving thing. It really is. We have people sending out text messages. I was the recipient of a bunch of them recently with no name on it. Talk about cowardly, no name on it. And you can't, and people are reading it, and a lot of people believe it. It doesn't matter they'll believe it. That's the cell phones. I spoke with an IT professional, said that's still a Wild West. They're having trouble, with that and correcting that situation. Emails are getting a little better. There are people who are sending emails coming from the dark. Little by little, it's evolved. Technology is evolving. We're finding out who's doing that. So our own IT department is very, confident and hopeful with that. But they mentioned that the cell phones are a problem. They're a real problem. So I think any rifts, we've seen them before in both parties, and it's up to the leaders who are there now to step above that. And it's hard. Right? You got to have a thick skin, but that's the way that history remembers those who rose above it and got things done. Not the ones that, as Teddy Roosevelt would say, were on the side criticizing all the time. Right? History doesn't remember them. They remember the ones who were the statesmen, people who rose above it. And it's hard. It's hard. Sometimes I don't follow that advice, and it's a constant battle, and you have to work at it. And But yeah, it will definitely get better.
So several members, kind of related, want to know if you're planning to run for re-election next year.
One term at a time, Peter, one term at a time. I just blessed to get up every day, and any day you have your health is a good day, and you have to stay focused, and you don't know what tomorrow brings. So I'm just grateful that the people in my hometown gave me a chance to publicly serve. So they owe me nothing. I owe them everything. So I appreciate but I'm not there yet.
So we're going to open to the floor here for additional questions.
Recently at the BET meeting, there was a discussion about some ADA upgrades on Greenwich Avenue. And one of the BET members happened to say that we need to look at women in expensive high heels instead of people with disabilities. How can we have a BET where we're not sending our best and our brightest, where we don't have people who are following the law, which is ADA? How do we allow that to continue to happen? And what can we do to bring our town into compliance after 50 years of architectural barriers and then 30 years of ADA?
Yeah, so what Alan's talking about, and thank you for the question, Alan, is it's the law is you have to be ADA compliant, but we also want to be, and thanks to largely in part to your work, ADA inclusive, right? We want people to be able to go to places, get to places to and from safely, just like anybody who's healthy. We've been warned already about that, and so we're going to end up getting fined if we don't do that. And luckily, and sued.
Fines would be nice.
Sued, but the
You're going to get
yes. So everything we're doing now. We're incorporating that into it. So when you see us fighting, when we had a grant a year and a half ago for $2.8 million, it would have redone one of the intersections like we did up in the middle of the avenue, and it would have taken care of that 100%. And it passed for over a year. It passed everything. And then our rules state that if one member of the RTM appeals it, the RTM can take it up again. And they got, I don't know, about 20 people or so to appeal it. And they threw a lot of misinformation out there. And including, some of our zoning professionals on the board, or volunteers on the zoning board, said that a lot of the information was wrong, but people voted on that. So what they did is they said, no, we don't want that grant, leave it alone. So that $2.8 million went back to the state, and guess what? Another town claimed it. So now we actually do have to do that now. And guess what? Who's paying for it? Your tax dollars. So elections do matter, and you should take a look at these things, because it's frustrating when you see the DPW professionals working on a grant and getting it, and we were so happy and we worked. Every single concern was addressed, and that plan was done over and over and over. So the same thing's going to happen now, but we're paying for it. We're amending it a little bit. It's not going to be as pronounced at that of a bump out, and I don't care if they like that saying or not, but it's going to be very similar to that. But we're going to be. I asked if we can try and find another grant, and they're going to look, but we have to do it. So we have to do it. We have an agreement, and yeah, it's
$850,000. If it's
yeah,
not out of the budget,
yeah,
the
yeah,
DOJ will be in town.
absolutely, yeah, and it's probably a little more than that, but that's okay. But it's got to be done. There's no question. So it does. That's the frustrating part, is that you just sometimes. It's like you can see it's like a death by 1,000 cuts. Somebody gets up and says something, and then the next thing you know, and some of them knew it was bad information. So, but it is what it is. We will get it done.
Yeah, yesterday I picked up a budget from the BET dated November, and I see that healthcare benefits are going up from $48 million 2 years ago to $60 million. So that's like a 25% increase. I'd like to know why is it going up. The other thing I'd like to know is the cost per pupil. In Utah, the cost per pupil was about $7,000 a year. Now, in the East Coast industrial communities, it's over $30 million or $30,000 per person. I just wondered what it was in Greenwich.
Per student, it's in the 20s, is it? I don't. It's a lot. But
Because in New York, it's
yeah.
more, and the special ed has caused some of
Yeah,
that.
Bart, I mean, if you look at that other parts of the country, it's like, it's night and day.
Yeah, and what
It's-
bothers me is that our costs, we don't get too much a deduction on our taxes for all the money that we have to pay here. And a lot of that is for education and other things. And so that's what I don't like about the Republican Party, to tell you the truth, that I'm limited to $10,000.
Well, that was, yeah, that was something that was passed in the 2017, I believe.
Right.
Yeah, that I think was a dig at the certain states, because in a lot of states that doesn't really come into play with a lot of people. I think it was hurtful to a lot of people. But some of the states I could see where the proposal came from, but at the end of the day, it was, none of us liked it around here, obviously. But, I mean, look, the history of the Republican Party really has been, in Greenwich, they've done a pretty good job at keeping taxes low, the lowest, and it's the envy of the state. So, I mean, every once in a while, something's going to get done in Hartford or Washington that none of us agree with. So, but yeah, it is, and it's, when you look, I always say this, if, God forbid you get sick, right? You live here and not in Utah or North Dakota, or no offense to those states, but they're not, we are 30 minutes from New York City, best hospitals in the world, right? So we have a lot of things, we're close to Boston and New Haven. We have an educated citizenry. We have just a hospital in our town. We have a public golf course. We basically have an airport. We have so many things. So yes, that's going to come with a price tag, and I'm okay with that. But to your point, that's why guys like Harry Fisher and the BET, right, they keep pounding me when I put a budget there, because they're saying, yeah, we get it, but people are on fixed income. So it's a balance, right? We want good things here, and we'll do the public-private partnerships to get them done, but it's an expensive part of the country to live. It is. And again, I don't have all of the statistics and the pages off my top of my head, but we try to keep, it goes back, we have several different bargaining unions here. And so they've done a good job at because you look at a lot of towns, it's a lot more than that. So it's back, but you also want to make sure we have, arguably our M&C, our department heads, are not paid as much as other towns. And that's been a back and forth. And so, we've lost a few to other towns. So you got to make sure, our teachers are well paid, which is a good thing, right? We want our teachers well paid. But it's a balancing act. You don't want to underpay because you'll lose them. Certainly you don't want to overpay if you don't have to. So I think for the most part, we're not perfect. But I think the record shows that we've done a pretty good job, and the BET and Mike Mason as our labor negotiators done a very good job. It's not easy. In fact, for as long as I can remember, one of the unions, I won't mention, public safety, was always back and forth. There was a battle my first 3 years there, and this year was relatively calm, and they were pretty happy, which I've never, and both sides got certain things. So sometimes if you dig into the details a little bit more, and I'd be happy to go over it with you at another time, but usually it works out pretty well.
Jim?
Turning to something you do have some control over at least, and that's parking, especially in the Greenwich Avenue area. Municipalities on either side of us, Stamford on one side, White Plains on the other, have parking structures to multiply the amount of parking they have available. Personally, I stay away from Greenwich Avenue because it's so hard there, even with the parking lots. Is there any plan or thought to ameliorate that? And if you don't want parking structures, what is it? Thanks.
Yeah, it's a great question. So, no, short answer, we don't want standalone parking structures because they're ugly. And Greenwich would become like other cities. So that's what you don't want. What we are looking to do, if you look at the garage at Town Hall, on the left side, that's actually multi-layered. And you don't even know because it's built into the grade. So I don't want to jump ahead of myself, and I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. I'll do it the other way around. We're looking at some potential game changers right now. One of which I will say is the Board of Ed. We found a nice spot for them, and they want to go to it. We're just working out the details. Once that happens, the committee I put together that was run by Andy Deuce did a great job about figuring out the details about that building and what we can possibly do. Once that, please God, that agreement gets done, we hope, that frees up a $100 million property that right now is housing a government entity. And the building's fallen apart, and it has been for decades. So the plan would be to put another group together to work with the public to see what we want there through a public-private partnership, because you're looking at probably, the two estimates I heard, one was 25 million, one was 50 million, and I think the 50 million is more accurate, about fixing up that building and really making it nice. But when you're doing that, if you look at the building and the parking lot to the left, near the ball field, that's been talked about for a long time, and I think that's a perfect spot to do below there and into the grade to get another 100 spaces there, right in the middle of the business district. I spoke with a commercial real estate broker last night about some plans that they're going to be presenting about other areas near there where you can get 75 or 100 without doing parking structures. It's not easy, and sometimes if you do a public-private partnership, we've already looked into this at Island Beach, the developer's going to want something more than the parking there. So we will own it, we'll make some money, we'll get tax revenue, but it's not worth it for them for this parking. So what else do you want? Some of them came with housing, which I thought was a bad idea for that area, but if you put some offices, some restaurants or something, now you have something going there. I think that makes sense, because surface parking lots really are a waste. If you look at the one across from the Boys and Girls Club, that's perfectly made for you want to go into the grade of the on-ramp to put another level or two there, and you could put a park on top of it and make use of it, but also get more spaces. It's just a surface parking lot is a waste. So we're looking at a lot of those things. In the meantime, we have, in the last 4 years, we've taken the meter feeders, people who work on the avenue. We opened up 200 spaces in lots off there. And 200 people have taken advantage of that. So that means 200 spaces were freed up, and it's still nowhere near efficient. So that's how this has been going on since before I was born. But we will get to something there, and I think that Board of Ed really could be the catalyst for that whole area if you can get something there under the ground. But it's got to be a public-private partnership, I think, because it's going to be very, very, very expensive just the building alone.
We have two more questions to close this up over here.
Fred, I have a question. Does Greenwich have a policy on Airbnb as far as regulating it?
This came up 4 years ago when Katie DeLuca was in town, and I got to check. There was not. We wanted it because there was some concern about people, who lived in neighborhoods. Somebody had an Airbnb, and there was not much, if I can remember, that we had on the books or that we could do unless they were breaking local ordinances. I don't know if you want to ban. You got to be careful because some people wanted to ban them, but by law right now you can rent out 2 rooms in your house. You can do that now. So, but this is a short-term rental. So I'm sure most of them are fine, but you can run into a situation there. We've heard some horror stories around the country. So I'd have to double check and see because we did look into that probably in beginning of 2020. Then the pandemic hit and I lost it.
And we have a last question.
Fred, good to see you, hear from you.
Hi, Steve.
Would the town, you mentioned the dump, would they be interested in a technology imported from Europe that would use the trash, wet and dry, as a fuel, turn it into a gas, and then generate electricity? And this could all be done with an ESA energy service agreement at no cost to the town.
That's a great question. So liquefying and making energy out of the trash. So European countries do that. Somebody, I think in Connecticut, was going to do that, and I think Scott Kalb was also talking about that when we had the trash task force. I know it's super expensive, but I think the idea is the fuel you would make from apparently in some jurisdictions they actually sell what they don't need to other jurisdictions, so they're actually making money on it too. So, but I don't know do you remember what the cost would be for something like that, Steve?
We take about a third of an acre, as I understand it, and the company would come in and build it at their cost and operate it as an energy service agreement for the town, so that it would be at no cost to the town.
Okay, if you could say, because I know we met with somebody a couple of years ago about that, and DPW, I got them involved with it, but it was the town who was doing more of it. But if you could send me that would be great, because it's certainly, that's another idea where, again, whether it works here or not, to explore it, because you're not only being fuel efficient and you're getting money for it, you're actually making money because they were selling the excess, the surplus, to other towns to fuel their fleets, the town's fleet of cars and trucks. So, yeah, if you could send me a note on that, or I'll give you my number after. Yeah. Thank you, Steve.
So thank you very much, Fred, for joining us here today.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter.